We're good then?
Yep.
Okay. Alright, hello folks out there in internet land. You're presently involved in the Comparative Witchcraft study group. And this week we are looking at Chapter 3 of Real Energy. Chapter 3 is titled 3 Worlds and 5 Elements. So we'll be going through some different interpretations of cosmology and how the elements work with with cosmology and energy. So, what is cosmology? Well, cosmology refers to people's theories about how the universe or cosmos were created and or how it works now. So cosmology, you'll see a lot of the creation myths involved in the theology behind cosmology. For instance, the very famous Vangelo della Strega, which is the text in which the Arabian, was the text in which Stregoria practitioners and other groups will refer back to when talking about their cosmology. Creation myth, the deity separating into the goddess and the god, and what happens because of that. But now, Indo-European cosmology, or early European and Asian, that general area, cosmology, deals with things like this. Something they would refer to as 3 horizontal worlds, which were the land, the waters, and the sky. 3 different separate areas. They were all of organic beings. And at the same time we have the 3 vertical realms, which were the underworld, the middle realm of land, water, sky, and then the celestial realm of sun, moon, and stars, and which would be referred to as inorganic existence. So, what are those things? Well, simply saying the horizontal worlds, where we are right now, in the physical, would be, of course, land, the water, and the sky, which is fairly obvious. You know, the earliest interpretation of 3 elements being earth, water, and air. And those are all organic, so the different things would be humans and other animals that existed within the land. And you have the fish and other creatures of the sea, and of course the birds and everything else of the sky. Organic beings. And then with the 3 vertical realms, we have the underworld, which would of course be an area that such deities such as Hela and Hades would reside. And then we have the middle realm, which would be that of course, land, waters, and sky, the organic plane. And then above them, the celestial realm, the sun, the moon, and the stars, you know, the planets and the other deities, goddess and god as well. All inorganic. Okay, but there was also a sort of a polarity there, which we explained a few weeks ago. And the polarity that was present in this group would be that of this world and the other world. In other words, again, organic and inorganic. The places where mortals resided, and then the places where immortals resided. And between these 2 realms we have the 3 gateways one would have to pass through. And they would be in the form of sacred fires, sacred wells, and sacred trees, or sometimes mountains or large stones, which were said to grow from the center of all things. So the universe itself would be mortal, immortal, organic, and inorganic polarity there that would separate it by these 3 gateways, which span from the center of all things, being that of deity, from where the universe came from. And all of the 3 worlds had their particular animals, such as fish or birds associated with it, and that's where we get into the world of the nature spirits. And the nature spirits, or as the ceremonials refer to them as the 3 kingdoms. We have earth being gnomes, air being the sylphs, the air fairies, fire being the salamanders, and water being the undines, creatures such as that. And then these creatures began to, of course, symbolize various concepts. If we want to get into the non-legendary creatures, we have lions, which would represent courage. Dogs, faithfulness. Oddly enough, the salmon would represent wisdom, and wolves would represent wildness, and sheep, domesticity, being domestic. Now, those are the different areas within the three worlds. But then, with the three gateways, we have trees, first of all, with their roots into the land, requiring waters for nourishment, and their branches growing up into the sky, symbolize all three worlds, and sometimes the three realms as well. Tree of life, we get that concept. And the oak would be connected to clergy. This is how we're connecting different people to what would govern them in a sense. We have oak would be connected to the clergy. The yews would be connected to the warriors. Birches to what would be called the producers, which was a caste within that system. And birches would also be connected to such things as pleasure and marriage. But now again, I'm going to read directly from the book here. To the ancient Indo-Europeans, including the Vedic Indian peoples, the Iranians, the Hittites, the Greeks, the Romans, the Celts, the Slavs, the Norse, and the Germans, fire was seen as the tangible symbol of deities and other spirits. Fire was present in all of the three worlds, being that of the underworld, middle world, and of course the cosmic world, or the celestial world. Fire was present in all three. In the underworld, it would take the form of coal fires and burning lava. In the middle realm, as it was, you know how it is to us physically. And in the celestial realm, it was as the sun, the moon, and the stars. So through that, we get the idea of the 3+1, which is the land, the waters, and the sky, plus fire. So originally, Indo-European cosmology said there are only three elements, that of land, water, and sky, and fire being present within all those three separate things through the worlds would be the +1. And you can actually see that in how their caste system was set up, because you have the caste of the producers, then warrior, producers being farmers and such, peasants, producers, warriors, clergy, the three, but +1, royalty, the tribal chieftains. So now we ask the question, how do we get to the modern cosmological system, being that of technically 4+1, earth, air, fire, water, and spirit? How do we get that? Well, in order to answer that question, we must first look at the Greek philosophers. The Greeks suggested that substances called the stoicheon, meaning step or component part, and that word eventually gave way to elements in English, which comes from the Latin elementum, which is how the Romans translated that Greek term. And a lot of the philosophers took these concepts of the three worlds plus fire into the abstract concept of what we know as the elements, which would be earth, water, air, and fire. And now the question became, which one gave way to the others, or who gave, what gave way to what? So then we have a philosopher called Empedocles, who said that everything in the universe was comprised of the varying amounts of all of these four elements. So Aristotle then came along and built upon this theory that was already present, saying that the four elements would represent combinations of the specific being or essence of the two fundamental sets of polarity. Now, what are these two fundamental sets? We have hot and cold and wet and dry. So earth would be cold and dry, water cold and wet, air hot and wet, fire was hot and dry. So everything had some sort of a combination of those two polarities. Well, all the elements had that combination of the two polarities, and all the elements made up everything else. But there was this fifth element that could not be described, so Aristotle, through his studies, came up with something called quintessence. Quint meaning five, essence being the terms earth, air, fire, water would each be various essences. So quintessence meaning the fifth element, which he called ether, or what became known as spirit. Now at this time, folks in India still embraced the 3+1 system that was based upon the three worlds. However, when the Hindus became established, they added the idea of air and ether. Of course, that means their original three substances were earth, water, and fire. So the Hindus added air and ether. They referred to that as akasha, and those would all be the elements. It wasn't until the medieval and Renaissance magicians and mystics came along that they, quote-unquote, appropriated the Greek elements and then represented them with our five-pointed star or the pentagram, which we discussed during our second lesson, which of course at the top we have spirit. I don't have a representation of it here, but each of the points mean separate things. Top being spirit, and then around you'd have water, fire, earth, and air. And if you want to take it a little further as to how scientists would describe these elements, you have earth, water, air, and fire would be equated to solid, liquid, gas, and plasma. But a lot of modern science don't like to be placed on that. So through all of that, it comes down to what the elements are. And since I'm sure a great deal of us don't have the text, I thought it would be appropriate to read exactly the guided tour of the elements. Now this book presents two different points of view. It presents a very old point of view from a book in the early 1900s by a man called Francis Barrett, and that book is called The Magus. But it also looks at a more modern view, written by Wiccan priestess Deborah Lipp. And due to time and also content, I thought it would be appropriate to merely explore Lipp's point of view and expand on it from there. So we first have her overall summation of the elements, in which she says, in Wicca and much of the occult, the four elements of fire, water, earth, and air describe the universe and everything in it. Everything can be understood as taking part in one or more elements. Everything that is whole contains all four, and can be understood more deeply by dividing it into four and viewing it through that lens. The elements are the building blocks of creation. They are the beginning of things. The undifferentiated void that preceded creation had no elements. The chaos, the primordial deity, had no elements. Or, to put it another way, all elements were one. But creation, things, reality, consists of elements. From a scientific point of view, the periodic table of the elements describes the building blocks of the universe, and the modern magician doesn't reject science. From a magical point of view, both simplicity and symbolism call for only four elements. The four elements give us a way of thinking about the world. They give us a structured approach to knowing the knowable, the unknowable. They provide us with a system of interrelations and what magic is all about. Interrelations. So, what that comes down to is creation is and of itself made up of the four elements: earth, air, fire, water. And the fifth element, which would be the the governing essence, that of spirit. So let's go on that tour, as according to Deborah Lipp, through her contribution here. We begin with earth, and earth is a substance of the body of our mother, Gaia, the earth herself. Earth is manifest in all things that are solid or fertile, or both: rocks, green fields, rolling hills, etc. Caves and other varied places are quintessentially earthy. A human being's earth is their body. From earth comes solidity, stability, and commitment. We call earth our home, both the home of all life that is Mother Earth and the house we live in. By extension, earth is hearth and family and all those qualities that make us feel at home. To be an earthly person is to be pragmatic, realistic, and tactile. Earth is that deep, solid, immobile place, both in the negative sense of stubborn and in the positive sense of patient, which oddly enough is also the two flip sides of the astrological sign Taurus, either very patient or very stubborn. That pretty much sums up earth. Now we move into water, where Deborah Lipp says, there are myriad natural forms of water, including not just the sea, but every body of water from a little creek to the Great Lakes. Water is also found in our bodies, in that cliched blood, sweat, and tears, in mother's milk, and perhaps most importantly, in amniotic fluid. Since all bodies of water have tides, the moon is also associated with water, and many lunar qualities are also water qualities. The personal quality of water is feeling. Emotion flows following its own path, which may meander. Emotion runs deep, with mysteries not visible on the surface. The moon and water are the menstrual cycle, and water is childbirth as well, making water perhaps the most feminine of the elements. Since moon phases are cyclic, ending where they begin and beginning where they end, it makes sense that water is also associated with death, and it's not surprising that many people's folklore depicts death as a passage over water. To make the cycle complete, Hindus refer to rebirth as an ocean. All these things combine to associate water with dreams in the subconscious, and from where to altered states of consciousness in general. Watery people are weepy and overflowing with feeling. They are dramatic, sensual, and otherworldly. And if we continue on, Lipp says about air. In the natural world, air is associated most closely with the sky, wind, and clouds. Birds of all kinds belong to this element. In a person, air is associated with thought and with intellect. Ideas are said to come from air as is inspiration, a word that also means to breathe in. Logic and scholarship are air functions, which is perhaps why academics are said to live in ivory towers as opposed to ivory basements. People who spend all of their time thinking have their heads in the clouds, and if they're airheads, they mistake imagination for real life and are impractical. And finally we have fire. In nature, fire is itself, first and foremost. Fire has always been set aside from the other elements because fire alone has no natural home on the earth. Air has the sky, water the sea, and earth the land, but only fire stands apart from geography. In nature, fire is the outsider. It is out of control and it conforms to no known rules. The place fire is most connected to is the desert. Other natural things associated with fire either burn, like chilies or cumin, or are red or especially orange-colored, like fire opals. The personal quality of fire is will. Willfulness burns hot, and the will to get things done is a spark that ignites. Temper is also associated with fire. A fiery person is a hothead, and lust is fiery. You burn with desire. All of these things are closely associated with the life force itself, the spark within that fills us with life. For that reason, healing is a thing of fire. A person who is losing his spark needs fire, magic, to reignite him. So, that's a lot of information about each of the four elements. So let's summarize. Okay. We see that earth, again, back to what Isaac and Phaedra Bonowitz said in the main text of Real Energy. In summary, we see that earth is the element of the body, and all that is physical, tangible, and solid and real. Earth, too, is mystery and wildness, represented by the leaping stag, deserted mountains, the vitality of living, and the secrets of the hidden cave and virgin forest. When casting the circle, especially if you tune into our weekly rituals, you will hear us call Earth, the guardian of the North, be the power of integration, the power of wisdom, using it to connect with ourselves in a grounded, focused fashion. That is Earth. Water is the element of the unconscious, the ocean of dreams and the depths of our emotions. Again, water, power of emotion. I think that's fairly straightforward. And then finally, air is the element of the mind, representing our ability to think and to discriminate, to know and to understand. Intellect. Air, the power of intellect. And finally, fire, the element of energy, will, and transformation. Sometimes we refer to it as the power of manifestation. Fire is also a transformative tool, taking wood, turning it into ash, taking metal and heating it up so that it might be malleable and be able to change its shape, or we are able to make it change its shape with the help of fire. So what is then spirit? Because it is not mentioned within what Deborah Lipp had written. So what is spirit then? It is said rather, well, simply for lack of a better term, spirit exists everywhere and nowhere. It cannot be measured nor its motions mapped. But when its power and influence depart, we are metaphorically or literally dead. So spirit is just exactly what it sounds. Spirit is everything, is everywhere, but nowhere at the same time. Spirit is the overarching deity, the force behind all that lives. For instance, when you pass away, your spirit is no longer there. The energy of the spirit leaves. Okay. So, now let's move on to modernly how it is interpreted. The idea of the five elements as it exists today is primarily used as the basis of the core of Western system of correspondences, sympathetic magic, which plays a part in other systems such as astrology and the tarot. Astrology and tarot, you'll notice that, well, in tarot specifically, the four suits represents four elements. You have pentacles being earth, swords represent air, the cups, of course, is water, and finally the rods or staves is fire. All sympathetic. And many mystics and magicians believe that we as individuals are microcosms of the larger universe, and the larger universe would be a macrocosm. A concept that is summed up in the phrase, as above, so below. As above, so below is another form of sympathetic, sympathetic magic, for lack of a better term. As above, so below. In the microcosm will function as a whole, much as the macrocosm does, the universe. So the individual acts in a way that does spirit, as above, so below. Thus, in circle, when we invoke the elements, or the guardians, whatever you wish to call them, the eights, the winds, thus, when we invoke the elements in a ceremonial place, we are also calling ourselves to be fully present. And let's explain that further. Beginning with, well, air. We are summoning our higher intellect. Fire. We are summoning our powers of manifestation and transformation. The ability to make things happen. With water, we are summoning our emotional selves. And if you're a man, it helps you to get in contact with your feminine side indeed. And finally, earth. Our integration and our wisdom. Our patience and our ability to make things come together. And that's how energy is worked and called within the circle. And finally today, we will explore the exercise of this chapter. Now last week we did the pre-exercise exercise, which told us how to get in contact with ambient energy. In other words, what's going on around us and our memory. So now let's go into the nitty-gritty and actually use energy with exercise 2, which is meeting the elements. And there are several steps, or several layers and levels rather. So let's explore exercise 2, meeting the elements. First, one must become aware with the element. So for this exercise, you will be increasing your awareness of each element by finding it in your everyday life. No special equipment is required, only open eyes and conscious observation. For each element in turn, look around your environment and note everything and anything that it corresponds to or could be associated with that element. Engage all your senses at the hunt for the element, including touch, smell, taste, and hearing, if it's appropriate. And here are some examples one could do. Water goes in a cup, look around your room. How many cups or bowls or shapes of which do you see? Trees go in the earth. How many things you can find made of wood or stone can you find? Many things are conveyed through the air. What do you hear and smell? What is on the air? Think creatively. Although fire is hot, the refrigerator might yield some spicy foods. So, at this point, you want to limit yourself to one element at a time and decide in advance how long the exercise will last. And it is recommended that you concentrate on each element 1 hour per day, 1 full day, or up to 1 full week at most. If you choose an hour, do each element on 4 days in succession. You may just record your observations in a journal. So what we're asking you to do is attempt a way to perceive the elements in your everyday life. This is level 1 of this exercise. So if you want to perceive earth, just take walks. Feel the earth beneath you. Reach down and grab the soil. Look at a tree, and just take it all in. Sit down in the grass, feel the grass, smell the grass, and if you're one of those interesting sorts of people, chew on the grass for a bit. You might look like a farmer or something, but again, continue to do so. For fire, yes, eat spicy foods, create a campfire, light a candle, perhaps. For air, listen to the wind. Smell the scents that are on the air. See the leaves blowing in the wind, or, well, since it is that time of year, depending on where you are in this country, see the snow blowing on through when it comes, if it comes. See the rain coming on through. Whistle a little bit, that's air, and vibration. For water, look at those, find those shapes of bowls and cups. Have a glass of water. All of that. Perceive the elements in your everyday life. And that will bring us to level 2, which would be the immersion in the elements. And for this exercise, you'll be immersing yourself in the elements one by surrounding yourself with objects and experiences that correspond with them. Incorporate each element in turn into every aspect of your day. Dress in elemental colors. Eat food and drink beverages that could be associated with your element. Choose activities related to the element. For example, go swimming or skydiving, or plant a tree. Watch a movie that relates to your element, say an action flick for fire, or a chick flick for water, emotion. If you use the journal for level 1 of the exercise, refer to it for further inspiration. On recommended duration, 1 full day, 1 full week, 1 full month, or 1 complete season per element, during that time. And if you're interested, it also has a list of correspondences, the sympathies. For clothing, air will have thin floaty fabrics, pale colors, mesh, netting. For fire, bright colors, metallic fabrics. Water, blue and muted tones, flowing silks, things like that. Earth, wool, denim, leather, thin colors of green, brown, black, or white. That's clothing correspondences. Food correspondences for air, carbonated beverages, whipped cream, mousse, meringues, poultry. For fire, hot drinks, spicy tomato juice, anything with hot peppers. Water, all beverages, especially the cool ones, soups, juicy fruits, and fish. And for the earth, we have frozen drinks, heavy stews, gamey meats, and fresh or raw vegetables. The magical correspondences we have are, again, you will notice the tarot for the magical correspondences, air being swords, fire being staves or rods or wands, water being cups, earth being pentacle, but we also, let's go back a little bit to explain the other ones, air as well has sharp edges, birds, feathers, and incense, fire can be flames and candles, water, cups, bowls, cauldrons, fish, flowing water, and earth can also be the stones and forests, little earth. Timing correspondences. Air, you can begin at dawn, the spring equinox, or the heliacal new moon. For fire, you can begin at noon, the summer solstice, or the full moon. Water, begin at sunset, the autumnal equinox, or the waning moon. And finally, earth, beginning at midnight, the winter solstice, or the dark of the moon. So again, for level 2, what are you actually doing? You are finding, you're exploring the correspondences of these elements, and feel the energy that comes off them when you do that. If you can, certainly take a swim for water, hike for earth, do something in the extreme, skydive for air, fly a kite if you can, things such as that. And for fire, like they say, watch a film, an action film with lots of explosions. And then for air, if you are lucky enough to go off and take a flight, all of that. And it's just the ability to perceive one element at a time. So that's all the information I wish to cover this week. But before I go off, I want to see if there's anything out in the chat rooms at all. Anything out there? Nope. So, in that case, I'd like to thank you for listening and tuning in, and if you're watching us in the archives, thank you for catching up. A bit of a bland sort of week, I realize, but don't worry. Next week we will begin cosmic and earth energies, the difference between as above, so below, you know. How are they similar? So again, until next week, may you blessed be.